Hey folks, in this episode we're going to be learning how to make this procedural candle flame. If you stick around towards the end, I'm also going to show you how to make a wax candle material. Although this is a procedural material, if you render it out as an image sequence or as a movie, you can then use it as an animated image texture, which can save on memory in some cases. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I'm in Blender, I'm going to select everything and then I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to add a mesh plane. I'm going to hit RX90 and I'm also going to apply the rotation. So I'm going to hit Control A and apply rotation. We'll rename this object to candle flame. I'm then going to drag this up here and open up my shader editor. With the shader editor open, I'm going to click new and we'll rename this to candle flame. I might create it in Eevee and maybe for the final output we could render it in cycles. Let's just go into rendered view. I'm going to delete the principled BSDF, add an emission shader. So that's Shift A, add shader emission, and Shift A, add shader mix shader, and Shift A, add shader transparent. I'll plug the emission into the bottom, transparent into the top, and the output of the mix shader into the surface material output. I might just go into this view here, turn my world up. So as you can see, we haven't got any transparency, it just goes black. So we have to go to the material settings over here and we're going to change the blend mode to alpha blend and we'll change the shadows to none. Now we've got transparency. Excellent. Moving on, we need to make the actual shape of the flame. To do that, I'm going to add a texture coordinate. So go Shift A, input texture coordinates. We're going to be using the UV coordinates. I'm going to go into front view. I'll then click this tab here, UV editing. I'm just making sure I've got my UVs. If not, I can hit U, project from view, bounds. So I'll go back to my layout from here. I'm going to add a mapping node. So that's Shift A, add vector mapping. I'm then going to take my texture coordinates and plug it into the top socket here. And then I'm going to add a vector math. So converter, vector math, and we'll set this to distance. I'll then plug my mapping node into the top socket of my vector math, and then I'll plug that into the factor of the mix shader. As you can see, we've got kind of a gradient going on here, and if we were to shift everything across by minus 0.5, that will be in the center. We'll get to that in a minute. First of all, I'm going to add a converter color ramp. This is just so we can crunch down the contrast. I'll need to flip the color ramp as well. So we'll go to flip color ramp and then we'll crunch down this flag here to increase the contrast. So now I'm going to bring this across to negative 0.5 and negative 0.5. So now that's in the dead center. We're going to be skewing the scale of this object, so we're going to have to drag it across a bit more. So I'm going to take the scale x-axis up to number 10. I'm going to take the y-axis to 2. And now we can drag this across, so it should be negative 5. And we'll drag this to negative 1. Should be centered. Maybe we can change the Z location slightly to negative 0.55. So that's the shape of the flame. We can crunch in the numbers using this flag here. I'll just set it to 0.5. Seems like a good mediocre spot. I'm going to drag this over here. I'll then drag these nodes and hit G, X, and I'll just drag them over there. I'm going to duplicate the color ramp, but before I do that, I'll go to Edit, Preferences, we'll go to Add-ons and type in Node and make sure that you've got your Node Wrangler enabled here. And then when you've got that enabled, I can hit Control Shift D and that will copy the color ramp or copy the node and it will keep the connection with the previous node. So when I've got this selected, I'm going to choose my color palette. We could have 4 colors for this one. So with this first flag, I'm going to choose a rich orange. I'm going to add another flag and we're going to choose a slightly yellower orange. And with the next flag, I'm going to choose almost yellow, not quite yellow. So you can see the RGB values here. I'm going to set to green to 0.5. And then we'll keep the white as white. Maybe we'll crunch these in a little bit. Maybe I can make this color a bit more richer. And this one would be a bit more on the red side. So now when I plug this into the color, you can see we've got a nice gradient. Usually at the bottom of a flame, you'll get like a purpley bluey tinge at the bottom. So we're going to recreate that now. So I'm going to add another mapping node. So Shift A, Vector, Mapping. This is also going to be with a UV coordinate system, and then we're going to choose a gradient texture. So Shift A, texture, gradient texture. Keep that as linear. I'm then going to add another color ramp. So Shift A, converter, color ramp. We're now going to add a mix node, so that's Shift A, color, mix, and we'll add that in between the color ramp and the emission shader. So the color ramp for the flame is going to be plugged into socket A. Socket B, we're going to turn into sort of a purplish blue color, around about there. We're going to take the color from the color ramp and plug it into the factor. We're going to take the gradient texture factor into the color ramp, and finally the mapping vector into the vector of the gradient texture. We'll just drag this flag across. I'm going to change the Z rotation to 90 degrees. And then I'm going to change the X location to maybe 1 meter. So you see what's happening there, the gradient texture. So I'm going to set that to 1. And now we can fine control that gradient with this color ramp here. So that's almost finished. We are going to be making a couple of tweaks. As the flame flickers, I want the intensity of the strength to flicker with the flame. We'll get to that in a minute. So that's the basis of the candle flame. Now let's set up the flickering. So we're going to go into edit mode. I'm going to right click. Then I'm going to click subdivide. When you click subdivide, this little menu appears. Then I'm going to click 10. Hit enter. And then I'm going to tab out of edit mode. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a modifier, and we're going to add a displace modifier. I'm going to click new. I'll go into this texture tab here, and we'll change it from images or movie to clouds. I'm going to change the cloud texture to 2, and I'm going to decrease the depth to 0. So now I want to go into my modifiers, change the direction to X. I'm going to change the coordinate system to object. I'm now going to add an object, so Shift A, and that object will be an empty sphere. So now when I select my flame, I'm going to choose that empty object, which is the empty. Let's call it flame empty. Now if I grab that empty, GZ, you can see it's moving the flame. So now I'm going to add a driver onto that flame. So with the object data on the Z axis, I'm going to type in hashtag frame divide by 3.5. So as you can see, that's added a driver. Now if I push play, it drives the movement of that empty, where we linked that object to the displacement modifier. The coordinates are from that flame empty object. It's now controlling the displacement. But as you can see, the base of the flame is moving as well. We don't want that. We want a gradual gradient from no displacement at the bottom to maximum displacement at the top. To do that, we go into weight paint. Let's just deactivate the displacement modifier. We'll go into normal view. We'll select over here and we'll go into weight paint. I'm going to hit T for tools. And we're going to choose this gradient tool over here. Now with that gradient tool selected, I'm going to go to the top, hold down my left mouse button, then I'm just going to drag all the way down until the bottom remains blue and the top goes red. I can do it to around about there. Now I'll go into object mode. What that's done is added this vertex group. To ensure the base doesn't move at all, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to deselect everything. I'm then going to hit shift out, left click in between these two vertices, which will select this bottom edge. I go into the vertex groups and I'm going to click remove. Then I'll tab out of edit mode. I'll go back to my modifiers. I'll enable the modifier, and then in vertex group, I'm going to select that group. So now as you can see, the flame's moving, but the base isn't. Let's just reduce the strength of that displacement, 0.2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the driver for the empty to control the strength of the emission. That's a fairly straightforward process. I'm going to hit Shift A, add texture, and we'll go for noise texture. I'm then going to select the texture coordinate system. We'll just duplicate this, and then we're going to select the object, which was the flame empty in this box here, and then I'm going to take that object coordinate and I'm going to drag it into the vector of this noise texture. And with your Node Wrangler add-ons enabled, I can hit Shift right strike through the noodle, then I can hit G, and we'll just drag this down, and I'll do it again, hold down Shift right strike through, and we'll just bring this across just so we can see where these noodles are going. I'm going to change the noise texture to 4D. I'm then going to plug the factor into the strength of the emission. You can see the noise texture coming through there. I'm then going to hit Shift A, add converter math. I'm going to plug this in between the noise texture and the strength of the emission node, and then we'll set it to multiply. Maybe I'll type in 5. As you can see, the texture is moving through, but it's a bit too harsh at the moment, so we're going to adjust this noise texture. For the scale, I'm going to hit 0.25, and for distortion, I'm going to hit 2. And what that will do, make the noise texture bigger. Now it's going to make that flicker subtle, but it's quite effective. If I go into rendered view, this is what we've got. Now to make it a bit more smoother, add a subdivision surface on there. Subdivision surface. Level 2, and then we shouldn't get any jittering or anything like that. It should be kind of smooth. It looks jittery on the playback preview, but when you render it out, that'll be smooth as butter. So now we can tweak this a little bit more. I'll just get rid of this menu here. So I'm going to push T, just drag this down. I'll select the flame, go back to frame 1, go to my modifiers. Just going to mute the displacement and the subdivision for the minute. And then go to front view, so numpad 1. Go into edit mode. I'm going to select these top vertices here. I'm going to go to proportional editing, so I'm going to hit O. That will give this option up here. I'm going to change it to sharp. Then I'm going to hit S. I'm going to scroll my middle mouse wheel, and I'm going to hit X. And then we're just going to scroll this down. We don't want the bottom vertices to move at all, so I'll squeeze it down to around about there. I'll tab out of edit mode. We'll just go into rendered view, and as you can see, it's a bit more pointy at the top now. Reactivate my displacement. Reactivate the subdivision. Let's just hit play. Excellent. So that's the candle flame. Let's model the candle. So I'm going to mute the candle. I'll mute the flame empty. So I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh, and we'll choose cylinder. I'll keep it at 32 vertices. I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to deactivate proportional editing and hit G, Z, and hold down Control. And then I'm going to snap that to the grid. So the base of the cylinder is where the origin is. Tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit 3 for face select. I'm going to choose this top face, this bottom face, and then I'm going to hit I. I'm just going to bring this in down to around about there. And then going to hit Control R and add 5 loop cuts there. I'll do the same underneath. Control R, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then going to tab into face select mode again. So number 3. I'm going to choose this face, shift select the top face. So we've got both selected. And then I'm going to hit X and delete faces. I'll zoom into here. I'm going to hit 1. I want to select this edge loop by hitting shift out and then clicking in between, and that will select that whole edge. I'll then hit Control F and I'll choose grid fill. I'm going to change the offset until the grid is in line with the camera. I then hit Control numpad 7 to go into bottom view. So I'm going to choose this vertex, shift out select to select this edge loop. Hit Control numpad 7 to go into bottom view. I'm going to hit Control F for grid fill, and we'll change the offset so it's in line with the camera. Okay, I hit Control R, and we're just going to scroll the mouse wheel until roughly you see squares. Okay, click that into place. I'll choose this center vertex at the top. I'm going to hit O for proportional editing, and I'm going to change it to smooth. Now I'm going to hit G, Z, and we're just going to bring this down maybe to around about there. Okay, I'm just going to randomly select some of these edges at the top. So I might select this one and this one, for example. Then I'm going to hit G, Z. We'll just bring this down to around about there. We'll do the same for over here. G, Z. We'll just bring this down to around about here. We'll select this one, G, Z, bring this down a bit, change the size of the proportional editing. We'll just keep going around, and we'll keep dragging these vertices down. Now we need to pull some of them out, so I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to hit G, X. We'll just drag this out slightly, just for a bit of deformation. Maybe this one, and this one. We'll go G, X, and we'll just drag that in. Maybe with this one, let's go to a side view here. I'm going to hit G, and we're just going to drag this out to around about there. You just keep working it. Okay, we're then going to select this middle vertex again, and then we're going to hit G, Z, and we'll bring this down a bit more. So I'll tab out of edit mode. I'm going to hit Control 2 to add a subdivision surface modifier at level 2. I hit Z for shade smooth. I'll tab back into edit mode with this center vertex selected. I'm going to hit Shift S and cursor to selected. I then tab out of edit mode. I'm going to hit Shift A, add curve, and we'll choose path. We'll then go to the curve data settings. We'll go to geometry, and we'll turn the depth up of the curve to around about 0.02. Maybe we can change the resolution to 6. I then tab into edit mode, go to front view, and I'm going to hit G, X, and I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to drag it so this first vertex is on the origin, and then tab out of edit mode. I'm going to hit R, Y, 90 minus. Okay, now I'm going to hit S, Z, and we'll just scale this down. S, Z, we'll just keep scaling it down to around about there. Maybe I'll take it just below the surface of the wax, so G, Z, drag that down to around about there, and then I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to deactivate proportional editing, so hitting O or clicking this button. Then I'm going to hit G, I'm just going to drag that across, turn it a bit, I'll grab this one, hit G, I'll grab this across, turn, grab this one, G, that one, and maybe something like that, so it looks a bit more organic. We can then also change the thickness of this with the top vertex selected. I'm going to hit Alt S. We're just going to scale that down slightly, and then over here under bevel we're going to click fill caps. Okay, tab out of edit mode, and then I'll go up to object, convert, and we'll convert to mesh. With the candle selected, I'll open up my shader editor. I'm going to click new, and we'll call this candle wax. This object selected, add a new material, so click new, and we'll call it wick. I'll then select this object, I'll shift select the candle, and I'm going to hit Control J, and now they're one object. I'm going to rename the cylinder to candle. Let's just add a point light, so Shift A, add light point, and then I'm going to hit G, Z, and we're going to grab this to roundabout roughly where the top of the flame's going to come. It'll be around about there. I'll then go into rendered view. Let's change it to cycles. The reason I'm changing it to cycles is because the materials we're going to be using for the wax is a lot more accurate with cycles. You'll get way better results. I might even go into this render view and click scene world, turn that off so we've got a background, and I might turn the strength of that down just around about there. I'll then select the candle, so the colour is going to be like a waxy kind of colour, maybe around there. Now I'm going to add a mix shader, so Shift A, shader, mix shader, and then Shift A, shader, translucent shader. I'll then copy this base colour, so I'm going to hit Control C, I'm going to paste it into here, Control V, then we'll plug this into the bottom socket, and we'll give this a value of 0.12. And we can make this colour a bit lighter actually, a bit less saturation. So I'll take the saturation down slightly. I'm then going to copy this base colour, Control C, and paste it into the subsurface colour, Control V. So I'm now going to change the subsurface radius. The middle value I'm going to set to 0.5, the top value 1, then 0.5, and then 0.1. As for the specular, I'll turn that to 0.25. I'm going to turn the roughness to 0.333. Let's just get rid of the world. We can see what we've got here. So for the subsurface scattering, I'm going to turn this up to 0.12. Subsurface is dictated by the real world. In order to get it to work properly, we need to reduce the size of the candle to a real world scale, because at the moment it's 2 meters by almost 2 meters high, and that just isn't accurate. So I'm going to take the candle, I'm going to scale this down. It's going to be a big candle. So I'll scale it down to, so it's 20 centimeters wide roughly by 20 centimeters high. I'll then take that light object. So I'll take this light object, and then I'm going to hit G, Z, and we'll drag this down to the tip of where the flame's going to be. Then if I go into this rendered view, as you can see, it's now working a lot better. Literally the scale of an object is directly correlated to how the subsurface is going to work on the object. I'm just going to select the candle, hit Shift A, and apply the scale. So I'm kind of happy with that result. Maybe I can adjust the size a bit more. So I'm going to select this point light, I'm going to shift select the candle, go over to here to transform pivot point, and I'm going to select active element. So everything's going to scale with the active element, which is the candle, because it's the last thing I selected. Maybe I'll drag that up to about there. So it's 20 centimeters high, it's just over 20 centimeters wide. I'll just check that. Yep, 0.25. I'm going to grab my candle, hit Shift A, and apply the scale. I'm going to reactivate my candle flame, which is here. I'll then go into this view, select my candle flame. As you can see, the origin of the flame is in the dead center, this orange dot here. We don't want that. I want it at the base of the flame. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'll select all, and then I'm going to hit G, Z, and hold down control. I'm just going to grab it to around about there. And then when I tab out of edit mode, now the origin is set near the base. Now I'm going to select the point light. I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. I'll then select my candle flame. I'm going to hit Shift S, selection to cursor. And now I can scale down. We just keep scaling down until it's roughly round about the right size. Let's just go into preview mode. Clearly that's not big enough, but I'm going to hit G, Z, scale this down, and then hit S, and we'll scale it up to around about there. It's quite a big flame on that. Reduce that, and then I'll grab this point light. Hit G, Z, and we'll grab this up to the tip of the point light. I'm going to grab the flame, I'm going to hit Shift A and apply the scale. That's way too much power now, so we're going to have to reduce that on the modifiers. So you go to your displacement, reduce that to 0.025 perhaps, maybe a bit more, 0.01. Maybe drag it up slightly as well to round about there. Where we're in cycles mode, I want to turn off shadows for this object. So I go to the object data, we'll go to visibility, and we're going to deactivate shadows. So now that point light won't have any effect on this. Maybe we can turn the point light down a bit, give it a bit of a yellow color, orange yellow, and turn it down to maybe 5 watts. So now I'm going to set up this flame so it's always pointing towards the camera. That's an easy enough task, so I'll grab my camera. Let's just bring it a bit closer to the object. Okay. Actually, let's just move the camera over here. Just going to move the camera at a bit of an angle so we can see this actually happen. With the flame selected, I'll go to Object Constraints, Add Constraint, and we'll select Locked Track. And then we select the camera. Now, as you can see, wherever the camera is always going to point at the camera. Let's move the camera back to its place. 0, maybe minus 0.5, 0.2. I want to recenter my cursor, so I'm going to hit Shift C, set up a camera controller, Shift A, and we'll go for empty sphere. We'll rename this to camera controller. I'll go into top view, and then grab my camera. I'm going to hit G, Y. I'm just going to bring this out to around about there. I'm then going to hold down Shift and left click, select the camera controller empty, and hit Control P, and then I'll select Object Keep Transform. So now when I select this empty, and if I rotate it, the flame is always looking at the camera. Maybe I'll zoom in a bit, so I'll select my camera and I'll type in 40 for 40 mil. I can also select my empty camera controller, and we can go up and down. Now I want my camera to track the flame, so in order to do that, I've got my camera selected. I'll go into Constraints, we'll go to Add Constraint, and we'll select Track 2, and then I'll select the candle flame. So now if I grab my camera controller and hit G, Z, the camera's always going to look at the flame. So with my camera controller selected, I'm just going to open up a new window up here. I'm going to change this to graph editor. I'm going to set my end frame to 240 frames. I'll hit N to get rid of that panel. I'll bring up my timeline. So with the camera controller selected, on the Z rotation, I'm going to add a keyframe, and on the Z location, I'm going to add a keyframe. I'll then open up those keyframes. So I'll select the Z rotation. I'll go to modifiers, add modifier, and we'll go noise. As you can see, this is added noise to the Z rotation. Maybe I'll turn the strength up to 4 and set the scale to 100. Okay, maybe the strength of 4 is a bit too much. Maybe I'll go for 2. Possibly 1 even. And if we want this to loop, open this tab, click restrict frame range. So we'll start on frame 1, end on frame 240, and we want to blend in over a period of, let's say, 60 frames and blend out over 60 frames. And now it should be a continuous loop. We're going to copy this modifier. So click this button to copy, we'll go to Z location and we're going to paste it, but we don't want to replace, we want to click add, so it only goes up, it won't go below the surface, and we'll change the offset to maybe 500, and we'll change the strength down to 0.25. Let's add a floor plane, so I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh plane, I'm going to hit S10, enter, and then I'm going to add a modifier to that, which will be a subdivision surface, it may be level 3. We're going to animate this light to move, and this will simulate the camera flickering with the shadows. So with the light selected, I'm just going to increase the radius a slight amount to maybe 0.025. just for slightly softer shadows. I'm then going to click the object data, and I'm going to hit I on the location, which will add keyframes. We'll then open up those keyframes, and on the X location I'm going to paste that modifier in. Let's just see how that's affecting it. Okay, that's moving way too much, as you can see. We could probably reduce that down to 25 and the strength down to 0.05. Just so there's a little bit of movement there. We're going to copy that modifier. We'll go to the Y location. We're going to paste it into there. We'll change the offset to 250. We're going to copy that modifier and we're going to paste it on the Z location, and we're going to change the offset to 500. So we're going to go to frame 1. I'm then going to shift select the flame, shift select the candle. So they're all selected, the light, the flame and the candle. Go into camera view, and then going to hit shift D and then shift Z. So then we can move it on every axis but the Z axis. I'll then select just the candle body of the copy. I'm going to hit R, Z, and we'll just rotate this round to round about there. And then select all again. So select the lamp, select the flame, and select the candle. I'll make sure our pivot point is changed to active element, and make sure the candle is the last thing that you selected. And then I'm going to hit S. We'll scale this down so it's a bit of a different size. And then I'll grab the lamp, and I'm going to hit I and location. I'll then select all that again, so I'll select the lamp, the candle flame and the candle. I'm going to hit shift D, shift Z, then we're going to drag this around to around about there maybe, and I'm going to hit S, shift Z to scale it on every axis but the Z axis. I'll then grab the candle, hit R for rotate, and we'll just drag this around to around about there. And then importantly select the light and then hit I on location, and we just do this a couple of times until we filled our scene with candles. So shift D, shift Z, we'll just drag this down to around about there maybe, and then I'm going to hit S, Z, and we'll just drag this down to about there maybe. I'll hit SXX on this flame to make this flame a bit thinner. Then I'll select the candle, I'll just rotate that on the X axis to around about there. I'll select the lamp, and I'm going to hit I for location. And when you're selecting these lamps, make sure it's always on frame 1. And the reason why you want to add the locations is because, let me show you, I'll just select all these. I'm going to hit shift D, shift Z. I'll move this to here, for example. Now if I move a frame, this lamp here, which is 0.004, if I move it, it's going to go back to its original location. Okay, and we don't want that. You might need to adjust the power of your point lamps. If it's a bit bright, you can adjust the colour of your candles to help reduce any whiteout. Of course, you can always go to colour management, you choose filmic, and then it's not going to blow out your highlights. Maybe we'll go for a medium contrast. This candle's looking a bit thin here, so I'm going to hit S, X, X, and we'll scale it on its local X origin. SXX. Okay, we'll grab that into there. So that's the tutorial in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found use from it. Please consider liking this video and hitting the subscribe button. It really helps my channel. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.